All right, root vegetables. Everybody likes roasted potatoes, right? A lot of starch, not real good for you. So we're gonna roast some root vegetables this evening. We have miniature carrots, celery, which isn't technically a root vegetable, but it's not bad for you. It gives it a good flavor, adds a little bit to it. Turnips, rutabaga, onions, parsnips, okay? The hardest one to deal with, we'll start with first. Rutabaga. It's a nightmare to chop. It's kind of the equivalent of a rock, okay? It's got a really, really thick wax coating on the outside of it. And the safest way to do it, the recipe calls for 1 pound. This one whole thing was 2 pounds exactly. So I split it up and I got part of it working already. Safest way to do it is cut it in half and then cut it as small as you possibly can and still have something to work with, because the flatter it sits, the safer it is. Okay, cut it in half again, cut the top off, and then you can actually, relatively easy, peel it with a knife. And if you've never worked with these before you leave tonight, go down to the produce department and feel one or find one. It's literally like a softball. They're the most firm, dense vegetable that I know of. And the same thing with this one. Cut it as flat as you can on the top, and then stand it back up and just go around the edges, just like we do all our vegetables and our fruits. Once we get that all down, you basically, for this particular cooking application, you want to dice them in about 1/2 inch dices, right? We're cooking them with pork. They should take about 35 minutes each, so we want to keep them about no larger than this. If you were going to put them in something different, for instance a pot roast that was going to cook for a lot longer, you would naturally want to go with a lot larger pieces, go up to about 1 inch size, and that's going to cook down and break down. But because we're using a quicker cooking method and we want them to be done with the same time as our pork, we're going to cut them a little bit smaller, and that'll help them cook much faster. You can see even with a good knife, it's still rather difficult to cut through. It is similar. The texture is very similar. The flavor is a little bit different. It's a stronger flavor. And you'll be able to tell what it is in this mix this evening as we do it, because it'll be the brightest yellow color when it's cooked. It'll kind of stand out a little bit on you. Okay, we got them in there. We'll go to our turnips, which are much softer and they have a much thinner skin. And with these, it's actually easier to use a peeler on them. You can go just from top to bottom, and they peel rather easily. Again, this is a much softer skin. It's not as waxy as the other. But because it's similar in firmness, they'll cook about the same time, as well as the carrots and the parsnips, I'm sorry. You just want to make sure you get all the purple off and the extra white. It's not very desirable to eat. And these will cut much easier than the other. And if you try one this evening and you don't like it, you can actually increase the quantity on the other, and it will work just as well. If you don't like the rutabaga but you like the turnip, or vice versa, just add more of one than the other. Slice them in 4s, and then you can lay them flat, cross cut them. And we're just going to mix everything together in one big bowl. We don't have to keep anything separate. get all them in there. Move on to our baby carrots. Why do you use baby carrots instead of big carrots? Anybody know? They are a lot sweeter. They will always be sweeter. Why? I have no idea. I just know if you take this little carrot and you try it next to a giant horse carrot, you'll taste much different. And anything you cook them in, if you put them in stews or soups or things like that, the flavor of your stew or soup will be much sweeter. We just want to slice them down. You want to get them as close to the same size as your turnips and your rutabaga. Again, they're going to roast and they're going to cook down. Now, if you were to put these in a pot roast or in something that cooks a lot longer, like a crock pot cooking, you wouldn't have to cut them at all. They'll break down. But because we're trying to get them completely cooked in about 35 minutes, we want them as a smaller, more bite-sized piece. For celery, I am using a pre-trimmed and pre-washed celery, but you still want to check it once you go through. Cut the bottom off to get that core out. Cut just enough of the top off to make sure there's no brown or dead. And then you just want to kind of thumb through it real quick. I do pull the greens out for this. If you're making soup or cooking in a crock pot, you want to leave the greens in because it's a lot more flavor. Since you're going to roast it and it's 350 degrees, it will burn them. So you want to try and get as many of the leaves as you can out. And we're going to take all this right back. And you just want to chop it. Again, everything about the same size. Slipping on me. Now, for parsnips. Is anyone familiar with parsnips? Use them a lot, use them very little. Okay. Kind of looks like an albino carrot. Very, very, very similar. Slightly different texture. They're a little bit softer. But they are relatively close, right? They peel the same way, just like a carrot would. You can see just like when you peel carrots, they do change color. Carrots get a little more bright orange because that dull comes off or the waxiness. These turn more white. Now with these, you want to make sure you cut all your ends off. And for these skinnier two, we're just going to slice them because they're not any larger than our carrots were. I think I have one more little one over here. We can do the same thing too. When you're chopping these, just like with carrots, always start at your thicker end. It's a whole lot easier to hold the skinny end and it cuts through much faster. If you turn them around, when you get to this part and you have to try and chop through it, it tends to be a lot harder. So cut it thick end first, and it gives you a little bit more to hold on to. So when you get down to the skinnier part and you don't have to push as much, you're not trying to get as close to your fingers. Now for these larger two, what we're going to do is cut them down. On the bottom, we're just going to slice like we've been. But the tops, you need to cut down. I actually like to quarter them. And that gets our pieces all about the same size. Again, always start on the thick part and cut down to where it's skinnier. Much easier and much safer to hold. Same thing with this one. What's that? Start on the big end, work your way towards it. especially if you're using dull knives. It makes it much safer. Okay, we got all that taken care of. Next on to our onion. Does it matter what color onion you use? Not really. Pick what you have in your cabinet, what you have at home already. With this one, everyone knows when I chop onions, I leave the back on, okay, and you cut across. The nice thing about doing that is you can make your onion pieces as large or as small as you want. You can cut it as close together as you can get it and mince your onion. Or for this application, we're going to cut it about 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch. And that'll still let us, as we cut across, dice our onion just like we do with our little pieces, but give us a much larger piece. It still holds together for us, still makes it safer to do. And then just cut around the core so you only waste a very little bit. And we'll add all that too. Now to my favorite thing, garlic. We're going to chop the bottom off of all of them. And it's my favorite thing because I get to smash things. Okay, we got all our bottoms off. Fastest way to do garlic, lay it flat, put your knife on top, and smash it gently. And what that allows that to do is as it breaks, it kind of peels it for you and lets you just peel the skin right off the outside. And it also helps break it up a little bit so when you go to chop it, it's already part done for you. And trying to make sure you get all the skin. It is super sticky, by the way. If you've never used fresh garlic and you always use jarred garlic, there's a little bit of oil in jarred garlic, so it's not quite so sticky. Fresh garlic will make everything stick together. Your fingers, your knives, your cutting boards. As you can see, I'm having a little bit of trouble getting the actual peel off my fingers. It's not so much coming off the garlic, but it's sticking to my hands real well. But the flavor is much different, and you get a much better flavor out of fresh. Okay, we got all that peeled. Now you just want to kind of bunch it up the best you can. Chop across. And then just go back through it. For this, you want to try and get it chopped as fine as you can so it mixes relatively well through our product. You don't want one person getting a large chunk of garlic and nobody else getting any. We get all that chopped and we'll add that. Okay. Have to change gloves because everything else will stick. We'll move on to our herbs. I am using dried rosemary. It does say fresh. No, it doesn't. It just says chopped. I'm sorry. And I have fresh thyme that we're going to pick. For our rosemary, we need about a teaspoon. And we'll go a tiny bit more. And our thyme, all we're going to do is strip it from the stems. Now, if you've never worked with fresh thyme or fresh herbs, start at the thick part of the stem and pull to where the stem gets a lighter color. And you can almost strip it completely clean. You get a little bit of a stem. If the stem is soft enough to where it breaks off, it's soft enough to cook down. It won't hurt to cook with. So you want to just grab them at the thick part of the stem and just pull forward. You can strip most of that right off. Now the only reason I don't do this directly into the bowl is because every once in a while you get a piece that breaks or you see a piece of dirt or something that's in there with it, and it's better to have it fall on your cutting board and you can get through it before it goes into that giant bowl and you have to try and dig through everything. Especially if you use a lot of fresh herbs that you're picking out of a garden or getting from, you know, not a grocery store. Even though you wash them, you still have to be careful. Okay, we got all those picked down. Now if you have any really large chunks that you want to chop through, that's fine. This is all pretty fine, so we don't really need to. I'll add all that. Now our last two ingredients, extra virgin olive oil, which I've been preaching for the last 2 weeks, well 3 weeks now. It's one of the better oils you can use. It works well as just a base if you want to eat it raw or for cooking. We're going to put a tiny bit in here. And then our coarse ground black pepper. Our pepper grinders downstairs in every store. They come in every brand and make and model. They have a little tiny key on the top, and that'll let you adjust how fine or how coarse your pepper comes out. Okay, so if it's not coming out at all, loosen it up a little bit, it'll get larger chunks. If the pieces are too big, you can tighten it down. It does have a slightly different flavor. It'll be a little bit stronger because it is fresh ground. You don't have to use quite as much, just like a fresh herb, okay? With this, you want to make sure you toss everything together. If you don't want to toss it, use a spoon or your hands. You don't want to get it all over the floor, I promise. Okay, we have all that mixed up. Take our baking pan. I'll get that all packed down in there.
Why don't you have it in a thin layer?
Because there's more there. It will still bake, I promise.
Will it? Okay.
Man, wasn't it so nice last week when she couldn't make it?
She called me. She said, "You gotta go."
So you're to blame, huh? Okay, now I wrote all these recipes so that they're individual. At this point, put this in the oven, roast it 350 degrees for about 35 minutes.